All right, welcome everyone. Let's get this show on the road. I'm just going to share my screen. Look, this is the team building and talent part 2, which is pretty exciting. I'm your host today, Ian Gardner. I'm a co-founder at Innovation Bay. I'm also an investment partner with Gelix Ventures. I'm not actually your host today. I'm just the MC, so I'm going to be handing over to Cam, who's going to be chatting to this amazing panel. So let's see what we've got. Always want to recognize and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we're all on. I am in Bondi Junction, which is part of the Gadigal land, and I'd like to pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are here today. Thank you. Now, if you don't know who Innovation Bay is, hopefully you do. We are here to support and connect the startup community all across Australia and New Zealand. We have been doing this since 2003. We're all about creating valuable communities and connections between founders, investors, leaders, and anyone else who loves startups. Look, we're kind of bringing this to today as part of the Summit Group. This is a membership community that we came up with about 2 years ago. It's for CEOs and founders of late stage or Series A and beyond companies. It's basically, the rough bar that we put in is, are you worth 20 million bucks? We've got 40 members. When they joined, they had an average valuation of roughly $30 million. We just did a survey recently, and that average valuation has jumped to 90 million. So that's not bad over the 2 years. So it is, we can't claim credit for that. It's the founders themselves, but we love having them as part of this community. It's all about peer-to-peer. It's all about knowledge sharing amongst your peers. Founders learning from other founders. They're the ones who get it. The only people who really understand how hard a startup is are other startup founders. So if you've been there, you've been through it, you've got some experience, that's what we want to do. We want to share it, clear a roadblock, solve problems, or bring different perspectives to a situation, and it seems to be working. It actually also covers life beyond work. There's 3 parts to your life that we talk about. It's your work, your personal health, and your relationships. They're all part of the discussion, because if one of them is out of whack, there's no way that the other 2 are going to be in whack. So it can be lonely as a CEO and founder, and this community is a support network like no other. So it's all about helping founders help other founders. A little bit about Hopin. If you're here last week, we used it, and we were using it last year too. A little bit like a physical event. Right now, this is the main stage. I'm about to be joined by the speakers in a sec. After the event, we're going to have the opportunity to go into some breakout rooms and maybe some one-to-one networking. So we'll guide you through that once we're finished. But on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see some tabs that will open up once we're ready. Look, we're going to get started on this part 2 of team building and talent. Look, it was a 3-part mini-series or a series that is focused on founders, operational experts, and also some investor community, which will be coming in next week. We want to hear their experiences of how to scale a company, build the right team and the right culture, and how to lean in your investors to help you do that, all of that as well. Last week, we heard from a few Summit founders who are in the front line of scaling. So a fascinating discussion. And we actually put that on the Innovation Bay YouTube channel if you missed it, so check that one out. Today in part 2, we're building on that discussion from last week, and we're going to hear from some operators. These are the experts who are building out the talent function and who are impacting that talent team. Because reality is that talent is everything in a startup. So building a strong culture, attracting the right people, and getting them on board is difficult, and that's what we're going to get into today. So let me stop sharing. What I'm going to do is invite the panelists to click the blue button and join me up on stage, just while I do a quick intro. And while I'm doing that, reminder to everyone, there is a Q&A function up on the stage. So it's on the right-hand side, just in the chat. So if you want to ask a question of the speakers, type it in there, press submit, and either me or Cam will get to it. Let me introduce first our facilitator. So Cam Webb. Cam is founder of the Sparring Partners, passion for engaging, enabling, and inspiring leaders and high potential talent. That's the people at the pointy end of the spear who are shaping the corporations and communities of tomorrow, and taking their skills to the next level. So welcome, Cam. Thank you for doing this. Ami Patel, welcome, Ami. People and culture lead at Canva. So most of us have heard of Canva. Huge job. Basically, if you have a pulse and you live in Surrey Hills, then Canva will want to talk to you and snap you up. Although I think actually it goes beyond that. Probably shouldn't say it that way, because you do recruit way beyond just Surrey Hills. But incredible story, Canva, and I'm really keen to hear how you've been doing it. You've got a deep passion for collaborating with business leaders and HR teams, and you're delivering human-centric, data-driven initiatives that are building out talent and bringing customers great value with your fantastic product. Jill Findlay. Jill is also from Glasgow, so if you haven't had enough of my accent, you're about to get Jill, so welcome, Jill. Your operating partner at Airtree, that I'm sure we've all heard of. They were in the press today just saying that they've reached $2 billion in funds under management. Your focus is on helping startups make decisions, execute better and connect with others so they can get things done and reach their growth goals faster, which sounds like the best job that anyone could ever have. So again, really keen to hear a bit more about that. Welcome. And Justin Anguishwat, Chief People Officer now at Blackbird. So again, we've all heard of Blackbird, I'm sure. So again, one of the sort of top tier VCs in Australia. Justin, you are spearheading the search for amazing people, nurturing culture, developing the Blackbird team itself, and helping the Blackbird team be their best selves, along with advising the startups on scaling people and culture. And before that, you were Chief People Officer at Thumbtack, spent some time overseas and done some really cool stuff. So, right, that's it from me. Cam, can I hand to you and let you have a chat with these guys?
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. So here we are. Justin, Ami, Jill, thank you and welcome. How are you all?
Good, thank you.
Good, mate.
Excellent. It's great to be with you, and it's great to have you with us. Now, if I look back at the backstory, the rich backstory and tapestry that is your working and professional experiences, there's kind of a red thread, a commonality throughout all of them. That red thread starts with, you've all spent time at kind of the big end of town, at enterprises. You've also spent time at the small end of town in startup world, scaling and growing. You've also spent time in international markets overseas, a lot of North American experiences, as well as time locally here in Australia. So I am incredibly curious to know, with all of those vast experiences you guys are calling upon, if you were to distill down your wisdom when it comes to talent, what would that distillation of all those experiences look like? So question number one to kick things off is, from a talent perspective, what are your three biggest things, your three most important things, your three critical things when it comes to scaling and growing from, say, 20 to 200 people? Three biggest things. Maybe, Justin, you're top of my camera here. Why don't I start with you? So what are your three biggest things, scaling and growing, when it comes from talent? Yeah,
my three biggest would be hiring, scaling infrastructure and culture. So as a cheat, put two into that one. Third one is actually just something different that's relevant to this group. I think it's founder focus on it in the early stages.
Nice, awesome. Ami, I see you next. How about you? What are your three?
Yeah, sure. I agree with Justin's, but I'll plus 100 him and I'll add a couple more. Nice. So one I would say is really building leadership and coaching capabilities and rituals early on. It's never too early to start that, and we can talk about that more for sure. Two is bake in hard habits. So for example, one that I would just actually point towards is like culture of feedback. Start that early on and bake that in now. And then three, I'd say, is take a long, hard look in the mirror and understand what are, in terms of your norms, what are unspoken values or unspoken behaviors, or even tricky ones that are actually quite critical to your company right now. So whether it's being very particular around language, whether it's being really, really candid in feedback, whether it's being extremely data and analytically minded, but what are things that are actually quite specific to you that can influence your hiring?
Awesome. I always love a good, long, hard look in the mirror. How about you, Jill?
Mine are aligned to both Justin's and Ami. I'd say, first of all, most important is ensuring everyone understands the mission and the purpose of the business and communicates it constantly. And I suppose linked to that is the business has values, and that those values are understood by everyone, and you live those values. So it's all about what makes your business and unique. And then I think the second one be to hire aligned to that. So you want to bring people into your business, the best talent that you can, that believe in your mission and that align to your values. And then the third one, maybe a bit more tactically, I'd say, is have a competitive equity package to hire those people and retain those people as well once you've got them in.
Excellent. So some great ideas there, team. We might actually pivot off that last one there, Jill. The whole idea of hiring good people. So we've heard for a long time this adage out there that it's a war out there for talent. A lot of competition out there. So how do we make sure we're getting the right people in the door? So maybe Jill, we'll start with you. What's your thoughts on a startup-friendly, but a hiring process, startup-friendly hiring process? What does that look like for you?
Okay, you had an adage there. I'll have another adage. They say that you should hire slow and fire fast. So I definitely believe in the idea of firing fast, but I don't necessarily think hiring should feel slow. It definitely shouldn't feel slow. Hiring should be a smooth process with clear communication throughout the process. So I think your goal in hiring is to have a really good candidate experience. So be clear with the candidate on the process, what each stage entails and the purpose of it, with a clear timeline. And that's when it goes to that slow part. It should never really be feeling slow. I think you should be giving objective feedback to the candidate each stage. And then if you end up rejecting a candidate, then they know why you're rejecting them. So we're not moving forward with you because of XYZ, which is such a better candidate experience than if they never hear from you for weeks. You know, not hearing during a hiring process is just a terrible experience. And then when it comes to finding someone you love and you wanting to close that person, you have to move even faster. So be really clear with them in an offer it on the same day of your decision, give the right signals to them. It's so competitive out there. So you don't really want to give a candidate an excuse not to choose you. So you can ask them when they can make the decision for whether they're going to select you or not. And that'll give you a good idea of their intent and whether we're going to grab them from the likes of Canva or Safety Culture or others out there. Yeah. So that would be.
I like that mantra, the hire slow, fire fast idea. Justin, what about if I come to you? Same question. Process when it comes to hiring. What do you like in terms of a process when it comes to hiring?
Yeah, I love a lot of what Jill just said, and I wanted to reinforce that. As I speak to founders, I think hiring is the single most important people area you can invest in early on. If you think about it, one bad hire can have a massive ripple effect on your culture and your trajectory. So I generally encourage founders to disproportionately invest in this process out of any other people process, especially early on. And if I reflect on some of my time at Google, where we did a lot of data and analytics around hiring and try to apply that to a lot of startups, there are really two things I think that are really important to solve for in a really great hiring process. And it's number one is clarity, and number two is consistency. And I can quickly cover those areas and this counterintuitive pitfall, which we've discovered along the way. So around clarity, I think my single clearest and best piece of advice is be really, really clear about what it is that you're looking for in a role when you're starting a hiring process. And this means like 3 to 5 max criteria. Because I often see people come up with a list of 15 criteria, and realistically, no one's going to have all 15. So everyone from recruiters to interviewers to decision makers end up anchoring on what's most important to them. So you kind of self-select out of the 15 criteria, and that's often really biased. So no, it's about picking the 3 to 5, and if you even can, stack rank them, and that's what you're assessed against. So that's the clarity. The consistency is just doing the same process over and over again. It's the boring stuff, asking the same questions of all candidates, because we overestimate our ability to judge talent. And so the best way to do this fast and well is to repeat the same process. For example, ask exactly the same question. and have a rubric that you've written beforehand. You know, what does a bad answer look like, a good answer, and a great answer, and assess using that. And probably one counterintuitive tip that I've learned is around when you're thinking about this criteria. One criteria a lot of people anchor on pretty early on is some version of some role-specific knowledge, so knowing something about that job. We did some analysis at Google, and our data showed that role-specific knowledge was one of the least predictive pieces of data for a really good hire. It was actually general cognitive ability, or their ability to problem solve, that was one of the strongest predictors for a really good hire, especially in a startup. So yes, clarity, consistency, and don't anchor too much on that, role-specific knowledge. Just by default, be intentional about it.
I love that consistency idea. You are a scientist at heart, aren't you, Justin?
I try to be, but not quite aspiring.
Awesome. All right. Let's take it a little bit differently here. So, Jill, you have spent a career really honing your skills on finding the right candidate for that role. I would love to just pick your brain a little bit about interviewing tips and techniques. What have you got to share with us around how you go through that interviewing process to make sure you're landing on the right candidate for that role?
Yeah, to echo Justin's point earlier about spending so much of your time on hiring the best people, I think when I was COO at Safety Culture, there was definitely weeks where I'd be 70% on hiring, interviewing, going through that process. It was just so important at that stage. I was about employee 25 at the time, and we were really scaling fast. So I've interviewed a fair few people. I think I definitely got better over time. I definitely think at the beginning, if you did iOS, you got a job. We got a bit more discerning as we scaled up, for sure. But I think my advice would be really clear on the purpose of the interview. So to Justin's point about being clear on what you're looking for, I think also being clear on the purpose of the interview. So the candidate should definitely know that format beforehand. What you don't want is to have a candidate having 4 interviews all asking the same questions. If stakeholders need to hear the same answers, then have a panel interview or something like that. So each interview stage should really have a different purpose, and it's due diligence on both sides. Whoever you're interviewing, they should have the opportunity to really do due diligence in the company, and you really want it to be a fit on both sides. So it's definitely a two-way street, and it should be like a partnership. From a tactical point of view, I really like top grading as a specific technique. If you guys haven't read the book Who, I'd recommend it. I can pop it in a chat channel after this, but I really recommend Who. Top grading basically is a way to chronologically go through a person's journey that gets them to the point of sitting across from you, and you really talk them through the decisions that they've made at each point through their education and their career, and asking them a set of structured questions. And people love talking about themselves, and people love hearing about other people, so it doesn't really feel like an interview, but it gives you real insight into how that person makes decisions, how they're viewed compared to their peers, how their managers and their direct reports would rate them and would give feedback on them. So I'm a big fan of top grading. It was actually Scott Farquhar at Atlassian who schooled me in top grading, and I think we still use it at Atlassian to date, but I recommend it to all the Airtrade portfolio companies, and it's a great way to interview. And the other part I'd say is definitely do references. References, if you ask the right questions, can be very insightful, more about preparing you for how your relationship could be with that person coming in. So understanding from people who have worked with them before how the areas that they might need support, their areas of strength, their working styles, their communication preferences. I just recently read a blog by Graham Duncan, and it was wonderful, and it gave some reference questions at the end that I thought were the best set of questions I'd seen in a long time. So again, if anyone wants to read that blog, I'll share it at the end, that we can circulate around that blog, but it's awesome.
Awesome. Sounds like there's 2 good links you can share with us there.
Definitely.
Ami, I would love to bring you into the conversation here, especially with this whole idea around hiring and acquiring the best people. Now, you, like me, have got a real passion around making sure we're hiring with company values in mind. So I'd love to explore that concept with you. Can you talk me a little bit about your experience and your advice as to how do we go about doing that? How do we hire with company values in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I started to get into that a bit. I get so excited about that topic. I started to get into that a bit in the 3 quick questions in the beginning, but it really connects to actually what Justin was saying about how role-specific criteria is not the be-all end-all, right? There's other types of behaviors or values that are actually really shown to help bring on new hires quicker, faster, more successfully. And I think one that Justin spoke to was this idea kind of around learning agility, which is definitely something I think for all companies that are growing fast to keep in mind and to even integrate in terms of the types of challenges that you share with folks. Are you giving them projects or challenges in the hiring process that might be a little unexpected or have some curveballs, so you can see that kind of absorption of new information and learning agility. But in terms of then values, it's thinking about, as a company, how do you function? How are you and your team and the exec team making decisions, talking to one another? One of a exec team that I worked with and observed in the formation of their values, one thing I noticed about them early on was they really challenged each other. They really debated. And we realized there was a hidden value there around kind of being comfortable with challenging, comfortable to like challenging the status quo is something you hear a lot. And that was actually not a part of kind of their hiring process. It was something that they hadn't fully like surfaced as being a part of how they did the work they did and really needed someone to fit into to be able to do and also be kind of an ambassador around. And so surfacing that specific type of behavior or value for the company was then literally translated into that list of, like Justin said, like 3 to 5 criteria that we're looking for, but also in the process itself. So interviewing actually created interviewing, there's a component that was where the interviewer would kind of play devil's advocate, right? And then also ask a question around what are things that are that you might conventionally believe about your field, but you would challenge or you disagree with. So because of that particular value, it really changed what the company was looking for and specified, as well as how they asked and engaged during the interview.
I mean, maybe I'll stay with you here for a little bit longer. So if people haven't gone through the process, because it is a process and there's a significant investment of kind of time, energy, and effort to come up with your values as a company, as an organization. If people haven't gone through that, what's your advice on how do you come up with those values, and then how do you centralize them? You've given us a little idea there, but can you build out, how do you centralize them to become a more values-driven company as well too? Any thoughts on that you can share with us?
Sure. And when you say centralized, do you mean having the team kind of on board with the values and sharing them, or embedding them, or what?
Can I leave that a little open for you? So yes, that also, it's part of how we do things around here, part of it infusing into the culture. So yeah, let me leave that as broad as possible for you.
Yeah. I think it's like really akin to being kind of like I said, looking in the mirror, being a little bit of an anthropologist on yourself and on your team. So right now, if you're at a stage where it's really, a few folks on your team, then really thinking about what it is in terms of how you function. And an exercise that actually was done for me that was really helpful was looking at a basic list of values, right? Like what are common values that exist, and actually going through the exercise of elimination, and then elimination again, and elimination again. And I think to do that in a team together is actually very powerful, to be able to check each other. Are we really willing? Like, we can't espouse all, just like with hiring criteria, right? You really want to have a simple list, right? 3 to 5 again here. And so with each decision you make, whether it's choosing, curiosity over choosing simplicity or whatever it may be, weighing with your team, if we have to pick one, which one and why? Like why and what does it look like for this to be in our behavior, and how have we seen this in the past in our behavior? I think the type of things that come through in that conversation are realizing like, oh, I'm really attracted to this value of curiosity, but actually now that you're showing this in our behaviors and how we worked, that hasn't really come through as much, right? Is that something that we want to change, or is that actually a value that isn't our core value in terms of what helps us be successful? So and then the other thing I would say too is it really should be values, especially as founders. Like, you know, you are that massive ambassador for the culture and the values, right? You really set that in such a critical way. And so really, as early as you can, knowing that for yourself as a founder, like what are the values that are most inherent and kind of natural for you, and bringing those into that brainstorm or those on that paper or sheet for the team to kind of go across, I think is really important as a first step.
Yeah, that process is really powerful. It starts off really easy. Yeah, scratch that. And then it gets slowly more and more difficult, doesn't it? As you're starting to really debate, oh, can I really let go of that? And the value in the conversations in that letting go and scratching things off the list is the power of that. All right. Yep. Let me come back to you, Jill. A topic that is often the elephant in the room for many startups is the concept of equity. Who do we give it to? When do we give it to them? You know, how do we structure it, et cetera, et cetera? Can you demystify this kind of concept of equity a little bit for us as well, too, as it relates to talent? Maybe whilst Jill's sorting out that mute, Justin.
There you go.
There you go. You're back with us.
Right. Equity, yeah, demystifying equity. What I would say about equity, I know it was in my top 3 of an important element as you scale from 20 to 200, which is equity alone won't help you hire and retain people. So I would say that as well. It's kind of just one important tool in your toolkit, along with all the other things that you want really to keep your people engaged, like mission and purpose and values and support. So I'd say that it is really important. So demystifying equity. So equity's got a few purposes. I think people think it's just all about, you know, getting people in the door. I think it's more than that. It's about having a common ownership. So you and everyone in the team are owners of the business. So there becomes that alignment, and you've got an incentive, a common incentive to, you know, work hard to get the business to perform well. So I think that's important. It obviously helps with the cash constraints of a startup. So you might not be able to pay really high salaries, but you can offer equity. Obviously helps you to be competitive in a market, especially at the minute with the kind of war on talent that's happening. If a candidate has competing offers, likely that they'll be getting offered equity from some of the other companies out there. And obviously it helps you retain people once you have that great talent in your business. So it's got a few different purposes. And I think just being aware of those purposes so that you can construct your ESOP plan so that it ticks most of those boxes. There's 3 main types of equity that's usually issued. So you get shares or options or RSUs. So I think the best thing that I would do is get some advice on how to structure your plan from, you know, maybe a lawyer or an accountant that you use. There's lots of advisors out there that help the startup community. Legal Vision, for example, I know work a lot in this space with smaller startups to ensure that they have an aligned ESOP plan for what the business is trying to achieve. Some principles that I believe you want to ensure that your ESOP does is your employees don't have to make any upfront payments. So it should be as, you know, cash neutral for your employees as possible. So they should only be having to make any payments, whether those be tax payments or any sort of payments upfront if they're actually getting benefit from the ESOP. You have to look out for all the tax legislations that affect ESOPs. There's obviously different tax implications for each jurisdiction that you're in, so it has to be tax effective. And a really important one for me, I think, is that employees should be able to retain those instruments if they're good levers. So your ESOP has to have a balance between employee friendly and company friendly, but I tend to err on the side of employee friendly. So you really don't want to have a reputation as a company that screws their employees for equity. So make sure when you are drafting up your ESOP plan that it does have that balance on the employee side and isn't too restrictive for them. So that's kind of some thoughts I have on equity. And I think the best way to position equity to your employees is always looking at the option number that you want to issue them, and then what that looks like in various scenarios, because no one knows what the future is going to be, what future is going to look like. You could end up being the success of Canvas and safety cultures, or you know, you might make it to 100 million, you might make it to billion, you might make it to 2 billion. So showing your employees what their equity could be worth under those various scenarios, I think, is really impactful. So then it's really tangible that if we get to this valuation, then this is what your equity could be worth. And maybe showing some case studies of companies out there where employees have equity has liquidated, and what that looks like for them as well. But get some advice, because there's various ways that your equity and your ESOP can be structured, and you want to make sure that it drives the right behaviors for your business.
Nice. Thank you, Jill. Justin, same topic, same question for you, equity. What's your experience, or maybe what's your advice for people around this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Jill said. I'm going to build on that from the demystifying standpoint. I think that, I mean, I know that equity is complicated, and while it has massive upside, it's often just written off in people's mind, kind of zeroed out. And a really interesting case study is when you look at some of the FANG companies, you know, the Facebook, Apple, you know, Netflix, Googles of the world. You know, these are companies that, you know, have incredible trajectories and very transparent valuations. And if you poll employees there and ask them, like, what is their equity worth? I think you'll find some pretty interesting insights out of that. Like, where I think the average employee values, you know, $1 of their salary as $1. But $1 of their equity is somewhere in the 60 to 75 cent range, which is insane, because it's a publicly traded company with a very transparent valuation that continues to grow, and it's liquid. So it's essentially cash, but it's still probably valued somewhere in the 60 to 75 cents in the dollar range, let alone a private company. And so if there's one message from that, it's to normalize that, you know, demystifying equity is not easy. And as a founder, you're going to value equity more than employees. See that happen everywhere, and it shows up in weird or wonderful ways. And so both of those things are true. You know, it's hard to demystify equity, and as a founder, you're probably going to value it more than employees. But I think there are some things that you can do to try and address it. I think one is it's helpful to share your overall pay philosophy. You know, if you have salary, if you have bonuses, benefits, equity in the mission, like what role do all of these different components play when you think about someone's total package? And within the equity component, I found it just personally really useful to have, you know, two different types of education, the 101 and the more advanced version. And the 101 is the version that you share consistently with employees and candidates over and over again. You know, how does an option or RSU work? What is a strike price? What does it mean when it's liquid? What are the taxable points? And a calculator to kind of allow them to, you know, as Jill alluded to, like project out the value of the equity. In the US, at least, I found that the more advanced education is a bit rarer, but when it's offered, it's really powerful because it engages those that understand the basics, but unlocks even more value in your equity without you having to do anything about it. Whether that means these more advanced folks start to understand, you know, early exercising or tax implications of an ISO versus an NSO. What are the terms on the cap table? All of that stuff I found has been really important to get more value from your equity without actually having to increase the value itself of the equity grants. And maybe I'll just leave like one last example in summary, which is really interesting. In my last company at Thumbtack, just before we did a really big raise, we did massive equity education, and people were like understood the basics of it, but then they were very heavily anchored on our post-money valuation. And one of the VCs that we were negotiating with really summarized this gap in understanding the best. And they said to us, you know, we'll let you choose your valuation if we can choose the terms. And so, and the kind of the joke behind that was just, we had a very clean cap table and very clean terms, and employees didn't understand that, or they couldn't appreciate the full value of their equity versus taking just the post-money valuation, comparing it to their other friends and trying to work out what their equity was worth. And so again, that example brought home to me how complicated equity can be, and that people won't always fully understand, but that just places extra emphasis on that 101 education and the more advanced version of the education that you've just got to keep doing. And so, yeah, I think full equity demystification is a goal you'll probably never hit, but it's worth making a lot of progress there because it's so valuable to you, the company, and to the employees.
Yeah, some great thoughts there. Thank you. I'm going to pivot us slightly here, Tane, away from the kind of talent acquisition, hiring, firing piece of it, and talk more about team building and culture building. Many moons ago, prior to their IPO, I remember going in and having a meeting with the founders of Fitbit, and they were having some internal challenges, and all they wanted to talk to me about was upskilling their managers, in particular their first-time managers. So I would love to pick your brains here, team, around what are the essential skills in your eyes for first-time managers? What do they need to have in their toolkit to be successful? Ami, I might come to you first. I know, again, this is a passion point for you. So thoughts, ideas, advice for us on that topic of upskilling first-time managers.
For sure. Yeah, I'll start us off, but I'm sure as we continue, there'll be more things to add to the list. But one of the first places I really recommend honing in on, I guess it's related, right? It's about feedback as well as having one-on-ones. And I think there could be a whole session on the power of having good one-on-ones, but I'll just start by saying a nice kind of hack or way to think about it is like, how do you create a system or, a means to continuously share feedback and discuss goals? And that is through the one-on-one, right? And rules of thumbs with that being, you should definitely be encouraging managers to meet with their, at Canva, we say coaches. So you'll probably hear me say coach and coachee a lot. But so I'll just go ahead with coaches. So we encourage our coaches and to meet with their coachees at minimum fortnightly, but ideally weekly, right? So whether that's 30 minutes weekly or 45 to an hour fortnightly, but having a consistent sacred time every week or every other week. It's the same day, same time on the calendar, that you know that those two are going to come together. So that's like step one, carving out that time and space. And then step two is having a shared agenda, a shared kind of template for that time. And the reason why I talk about that is because I think there's a lot we put on managers and coaches. Like, you are someone who's supporting wellness and engagement. You are supporting goals and achievements. You're unblocking challenges. You're gauging performance. You're connecting and creating culture. And that one-on-one template and that weekly or bi-weekly connection can actually hit across kind of all of those goals and parts of the manager's job. And really, by having a shared agenda that, hits upon questions that address each of those, so for me, it's a Google Doc, and myself and my coachees and myself and my manager have that doc, right? It says Ami's one-on-one doc or X's one-on-one doc. And in that, there's always a question about what were your biggest wins this week. There's always a question on to what extent did you get to use your strengths this week? Because like strengths driven development is something that is really important to me and is important to our company. There's always a question on what are your priorities this upcoming week and what are the blockers you see that I can help you unblock. And so the coachee takes time before that one-on-one to fill in that doc. And then that's already surfaced so much in terms of how I can be a better coach for them and how we can use that conversation to unblock blockers, celebrate what's gone well, and really land on next steps. So that's one really big piece of the toolkit that I would suggest. And related to that, again, like it opens up the space to share feedback. So as someone is sharing their wins or sharing their challenges, that's where that natural feedback can come in, as opposed to kind of a separate process or mechanism for that.
Yeah, thank you, Ami. Jill, let me come to you. Same question. What would you add or emphasize from what you heard from Ami there?
I'd say I couldn't agree more with everything that Ami said. I'm a massive fan, similar to her, on one-on-ones and ensuring that same shared doc, the consistency of the time, the commitment that you're making to each other by not changing it. I really make an effort to try and avoid moving my one-on-ones. It's the one meetings I like to keep consistently, and I try and move other things around to ensure that I do my one-on-ones when we normally do our one-on-ones. And I think using those one-on-ones to connect personally as well. So I think it's going straight in and going straight to work might work for some communication preferences, but it might not work for others. And at Safety Culture, I once had a ridiculous number of direct reports at one point, all very different people. And one thing that helped me, we did some work around insight, whereby we understood each other's communication preferences and profiles. And I think that was really helpful to me as a manager to understand each individual person's preferences and what motivates them, and it really got the best out of our relationship. So I would encourage the use of some of these tools as you scale up, to ensure that you have diversity in the team and ensuring that you've got lots of different profiles within the business, but also understanding what those profiles mean for each other in terms of communication. But yeah, Amy couldn't have said it better.
Awesome. Now, Ian, you're joining us back here on stage. We're welcoming you back. You've got some questions for us that the audience have come up with.
I do. There's been some fantastic interaction from the audience. And the best thing for us as the MC and moderator, Cam, is that we don't even have to choose them, because the thumbs up and thumbs down. We should probably start with the first one. And Cam, I'll throw it to you in terms of who you want to ask this to, but let me just read it out. It's an anonymous question. Culture can be a byproduct of the founder's personality. Any tips on how founders can develop the self-awareness to adjust their personality if it's stagnating or affecting the team culture?
Yeah, we've heard a lot about staring in the mirror. So Justin, maybe I come to you. Any mirror advice you've got for us about being cognizant of your blind spots?
Yeah, I think just more broadly speaking, I think that culture is like 70%, 80% built in the founder's image. So, I mean, it's a very insightful comment, and I think it's true. And even when you talk about later on in the future around designing your values around what are your company values and how do you actually operate, again, 70, 80% of that is built in the founder's image. So great that you're thinking about it. I think one of the most effective ways I've found is surveying folks, and especially the leadership team, because they see how the founder actually operates. And a good way of doing that, structuring that survey, is asking like certain types of questions around how the team acts in specific situations, around how does the team deal with a problem, how do you make decisions, how do you set strategy, etc. And then from that type of survey, you can ask, where are you, where do you think you need to be? And you can start to see those disconnects, especially in certain tension points around, are you an organization that appreciates innovation, but actually how you act is you act with a lot of safety. And so, like, where is the tension between where you think you want to be, or where you'd like to be, versus where you currently are? Another specific way of doing it, which I found the most effective, it's a little scary actually for founders, is doing kind of a 4-question 360 for a founder live. And it sounds very basic, but it's sometimes intimidating for founders because it's scary. And what we do is, I generally invite the entire leadership team in, minus the founder. And we sit down and I'd ask them only 4 questions. Like, what does the founder do really well? What's one thing they don't do really well? What do you want to hear from them? And what do you want them to hear from you? And again, it sounds very basic in terms of questions, but what surfaces from that is often like very real feedback around how the founder operates and the impact that has on the culture and how the leadership team operates. And so we tend to have a facilitated session, which goes quite deep, and it's actually a very strong team building event for the leadership team. And then the team steps out, and then the founder steps in, and then you kind of take the founder through what it is that you heard. And then everyone steps out, and the founder plays back to the team, hey, based on all this feedback, this is what I heard. And the team can then jump in and add more color or course correct the founder there. And again, it sounds very basic, but out of all the tools, I found that to be the most powerful for founders.
Yeah, nice. I see you nodding your head there. Anything you would add onto that as well too?
There's not much more I would add, honestly. I think what especially the last piece that Justin mentioned, it does take a little bit of safety, I think, in your team to be able to really do that and amongst people. And so that's a really great approach that way. If you're in a place where maybe that open dialogue is not going to come as, freshly or as the volume you want, you could also take a hybrid approach, right? I definitely, like, what I was going to suggest is a 360. Feel free to narrow down the questions. Usually there's more than you need. It could even be as simple as, what am I doing well that's helpful, and where can I improve, or what are my blind spots, as you said. And based on that first kind of round of that survey, you might find really helpful themes, and then actually be able to have some individual conversations or even a group conversation, like, hey, here are the themes I heard. Can we dig a little deeper in them so I can get that more specific insight?
Awesome. And let me come back to you in a moment with a few more questions. I just want to hit on one thing you said there. You talked about you've got to have the safety to have those conversations as well too. And I know this topic of psychological safety is something that both you and Justin are really passionate about as well too. Can I ask you, what have you done to play and experiment with this concept of psychological safety? How have you found it and kind of the application of it in the startup world?
Yeah, I have a hack for that. I've stolen a lot of the great work that Google's done. They did a study called Project Oxygen, and you can easily kind of look that up, and I'm happy to send the link. And there's literally a playbook for a type of health check that you can do with your team, and the types of questions to ask to even understand aspects of psychological safety. So where I've used this has been in a situation where I felt that there wasn't always a sense of comfort in sharing kind of disagreement or kind of bold ideas. And we really need bold ideas, right, to grow and grow fast. And so through using that, we did a little bit of a survey. This was in a small team. We did a survey to surface just the team's kind of sentiments around the safety they perceived, what they felt like were blockers. I think what was really important was coming back to the team with the results, and the playbook kind of walks through that. And Justin, sorry if I'm missing some steps of it, because I know you were there in the kind of origination of all of this work. But what we found was really helpful was obviously one, saying, hey, this is something I'm noticing. I'd love to learn more about this. And then asking folks to respond really truthfully and independently. And then saying, hey, here's what we found out, but let's really talk about this together. And there's no sense of kind of ego in the results. It's just kind of a full vulnerability of like, hey, here's what it is, and I really want to see this get better. And I think the kind of leader being able to kind of model that vulnerability and desire to grow and really create a safe environment, and what you see safety creating for the group and individually, I think is really important to echo there. And so from that, you can really get down to a couple of the greatest challenges for safety. So in this instance where it was difficult to kind of challenge the status quo or speak up or disagree, this group developed a little bit of a code word to use in conversations to make it very silly. So you could just it's like baby steps, right? Think of it as a training wheel, right? So saying the word like, hey, this might be bananas, but, and then being able to say something that might have felt controversial or difficult initially. And that's just an example for that particular element of safety. But I felt that getting to the root of it and having the conversation as a group was very helpful. So.
Yeah, awesome. Justin, maybe I'll come to you now. So Ami alluded to it. You were an insider at Google when much of this was getting formulated. What would you take out of that experience that you've applied into the smaller end of town in the startup world?
Yeah, well, I think Ami summarized it really well. I'm happy to share like a 1-minute version of that to take a quick step back. At Google, we love measuring whatever we could in the people operations space. And so really the question that we wanted to find out through this project was what makes the most effective team. And so we interviewed hundreds of people and looked at like hundreds of data points and discovered that psychological safety was the most important thing, together with 4 other items that were slightly less important, but still in the top 5, which were dependability, structure, clarity, meaning, and impact, in that order. So happy to talk more about it, but I think even in terms of things that you can do, there's hundreds of different things that you can do, depending on your company context and your stage and what you're solving for as a founder. But if I had to pick one piece of advice, given kind of the founders here, I'd say you set the tone as a founder. It's actually one of the most impactful things you can do as a founder. What you say or how you say something when someone sets, an ambitious goal and misses it, or sets a really easy goal and hits it, or tries out a new idea and fails, what you say and what you do has an outsized impact on the psychological safety of the organization. And a good example of that is OpenTable's CEO, Krista. I think she said once to her organization, early, often, and ugly. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, because then I can course correct much faster. And that's a really great example, because it emphasizes speed. It reinforces it's okay. And it tells the company that they innovate through course correction, not nailing it the first time, and which then takes a lot of the pressure off from having to get it perfect and only sharing perfect outcomes. And so again, that's just an example of where you as a founder have this like disproportionate impact to be able to set psychological safety at an organizational level by the tone in which you talk to the organization.
Yeah, great one. Oftentimes also what you don't say as well too, that casts a big shadow too on that. Ian, coming back to you. Question we're hearing.
Actually, Justin's answer reminded me of Facebook or Zuckerberg's move fast and break things. So pretty similar concept. All right, look, we've probably only got time for one more, because I do want to make sure that we're done the formal part by 1. So let's take this one from Stuart Snyder, which is the next most popular. Stuart's all the way from Adelaide, one of our Horizon Angel Investor members. So hi, Stuart. Any tips on finding tech talent in a super competitive environment? And I think the subtext to that, by the way, is that's the environment we're in right now. Any suggestions for hiring and managing a remote workforce, which is kind of a cascade on from that. So Cam, you can throw that to whoever you like.
Yeah, Jill, we haven't heard your voice in a while. Any thoughts on those 2 points we've got there? Virtual and hiring in a competitive marketplace.
Yes, it's definitely competitive out there. I think if I had the answer to how you get the best engineers in the current environment, I would be able to be the most popular person with every single portfolio company that I work with today. I think what's important to attract talent today in this really competitive market, and I think I touched on it at the very beginning, it's kind of come full circle. It's about really defining your EVP, what you stand for, what your mission is, make sure that mission can connect with people, make sure the culture and the values of your organization are attractive to the types of people that you want to hire. We talked about equity, but we also should really think about all those non-monetary benefits that you can offer to your employees, whether that might be some flexibility, it's around work-life balance, it's around you giving them accountability and ownership for parts of the business or their functional areas. It's about having less red tape in your business and freedom within boundaries for people to actually get in there and be able to change and make a difference in your business, and having that really clear proposition when you go out to market to recruit. So ensuring that whoever's doing your recruitment for you, whether that be yourself as a founder, if you're a small business, if that's your talent team, ensuring that the talent team's elevator pitch is spot on and they can really articulate the benefit of working at your business. And I think being flexible as much as possible is really important, and ensuring that if you are hiring remotely, then your business is set up for remote working. We've all been plunged into remote working without much notice. So businesses are definitely better at it. I think having our businesses that used to be in-office businesses who are now hybrid or fully remote the best at it. I'd say no. I don't know if you guys follow Don Price. He's a Atlassian work evangelist. He has some really good pieces around everyone's still learning about how this hybrid model can work. Businesses that are set up remotely from the start have an advantage, but those who haven't have to keep on improving how the work practices have to evolve in this kind of hybrid environment. So it's about realizing that and working on the best ways to ensure that your business can communicate with those in whatever kind of model that you choose.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. Now, Ian, I might hand things back to you. I know we've got some more time with our 3 panelists in the breakouts to come, but we might wrap it through now.
Yeah, look, that's right. And look, so that is the good news. I'm sorry we didn't get to more questions, but because there was plenty. But the good news is that we'll all be hanging out in the breakout room, so we can just go and catch up with all of you that we can't see here. So look, thank you, Cam, for doing that. Amy, Justin, Gillian, it was awesome to hear your insights. I might ask you to just click that leave button, because otherwise I can't share my screen, it turns out. And then I'm just going to do a quick wrap up before we all go, which is just a couple more announcements. So that's what we've just done, and really appreciate everyone doing that. So as I said before, we are going to go into the hop-in breakout rooms. You can hear from the panelists. You can join a discussion room. There is a specific room for earlier stage investors, because we recognize that you've probably got different things going through your head than some of the later stage ones. So jump in there if you want to chat about earlier stage stuff. And then there's a really cool feature, one-to-one speed networking. So if you just want to spend 5 minutes meeting someone you've never met before, hopefully, then do that. That's a lot of fun as well. So you'll see that over on the left side of the screen. Look, we are doing, I mentioned Stuart being a member of Horizon, which is an angel investor group. We're always looking for great deals. So if you have a great deal, we want to hear from you. We have some events coming up in October. Some focus, 3 focuses around that. One is frontier tech. So, think deep tech, impactful tech. The second one is impact, which is more, around doing good as well as making money. So if you think you fit in that, we'd love to hear from you. And ag tech. So Australia is very strong in that. Ag tech is going to be Adelaide. Impact is going to be in Sydney, and frontier is going to be in Melbourne. But it doesn't really matter. As a founder, you probably and you fit one of those. Don't worry about where it is. That's just where the groups are going to be. So there's a link. The link's there, bit.ly/renew founder forum. That might not be the link. If that's not the right link, you'll find it on Twitter. We are back next week with a final in the 3-part series with our investors, and we've got a great group there, which will be announced in the next few days, which I'm really excited to talk to. So that is going to be the same time next Thursday, 2nd of September at noon. Almost there. Thank you so much. I should have waved my arms a bit more at the start, but to our national sponsors, we really couldn't operate Innovation Bay without them. So Macquarie Bank, KPMG's High Growth Ventures team, AWS, and Farmark Ventures. Thank you so much for that. Look, that's it. I'm about to jump off here and go into the breakout room. So hopefully I'll see you all there. And thanks for joining us.